Hi and welcome. Today we'll be going to the Moma, right here in New York City. Joining us will be Floyd Norman, an animator from the early days of Disney Animation Studios. You've seen his work in 101 Dalmatians, Sleeping Beauty, and Jungle Book, just to name a few.
So exciting to speak with you about your journey, about your path, about how you built this whole story around your passions.
Well, my youth when I was a child, not that different from any other child who
Sure.
liked to draw and paint. It's just that most people, as they grow older, they stop doing that. And a few of us diehards, we never stopped drawing and painting. Most boys and girls become grown-ups, and some boys and girls can never stop drawing and painting, and so they become artists. So that was my childhood. Not all that unusual or unlike any other kid's childhood. My classroom at Lincoln Elementary School was filled with a bunch of kids who went on to become lawyers and doctors, and people like my girlfriend Gretchen and myself went on to become artists. We just chose a different path, that's all.
It's incredible, just incredible.
Yeah.
What were some shapes and colors and mediums that you were drawn to originally? I'm curious.
Shapes and colors? Well, when you're an artist, when you have that sort of creative spark, everything turns you on. And so you are, I think, especially attuned to basically the art around you. So you see that in everything you see. People often ask me, where do you get your ideas? And I said, my ideas are all around me. I've never had a problem with knowing what to draw or what to write because inspiration surrounds us. It surrounds all of us. It's just being able to see it, being able to be open to it. And that's where that's where the creativity comes from.
And you always used markers, you always used pencils.
I used anything.
Even at the very beginning?
At the very beginning, Gretchen and I used anything we could get our hands on. When we were little kids, we used crayons. And as we got older, we graduated to pens and pencils and brushes. But an artist, no matter who he or she happens to be, you use any tool that's readily at hand.
Anything around to say what you want to say.
Exactly. You draw on anything, not necessarily on paper, on canvas. You draw on anything that's available.
Of course.
That's what it means to be an artist, I think.
I completely agree. Completely. Yeah. Who were some of your, obviously you start drawing very early in life, and who were some of your visual inspirations? I've read that for Walt Disney, Winsor McCay was an early visual inspiration. So what are some things that you spotted along your way and said, I can do that, or I want to say something in response to that?
Oh, yeah. Well, when you're a little kid, you honestly have no idea who these grown-ups are. I mean, you see their work, but you have no idea who did the work. I mean, I was aware of all this art around me, but I didn't know a thing about the artists. I had no idea who they were or where they were or if they were alive or dead, for that matter, because we were just kids. As I grew older, I began to, an awareness of these great American artists like, Norman Rockwell and all the others whose work I had been seeing in art museums and in classrooms. You begin to put a name to this art. You begin to know, oh, that's Thomas Hart Benton, or that's another particular artist, and you begin to, But again, as you make your way toward adulthood, you're seeing the illustrations in Saturday Evening Post that your parents subscribe to, and you're beginning to know the names of these mid-century artists, and they all have an influence, even though you don't know who they are. By the time I got to art school in the 1950s, I began to be aware of all the artists who especially the mid-century illustrators like John Whitcomb and Al Parker and Fred Ludekins and so many others whose art just influenced us as kids. And you begin to know who these guys, who they were, the men and women who did this artwork. And so, it was an art education that continues even to this day as we continue to learn and study from our peers and from those around us, because you never stop learning how to draw and paint. You never become a master. You're always the apprentice because you continue to learn. No matter how old you get, you're always learning.
Always searching, right?
Always searching, always growing, hopefully always growing. Yeah, that never ends.
I completely agree.
Right.
So, working at Disney, in 1957, you got your first gig as an in-betweener.
Yeah, 1956.
Is that right?
1956. I was lucky enough.
1956.
Right. Many of us kids were still in art school. For us, it was perfect timing. We were still students in school. Most of us were still going to school. But at that particular time, Walt Disney needed a lot of artists because the studio was growing. The studio had just expanded into television, and they were doing short cartoons, feature films, live action films, and there was just a great need for artists at the Disney studio. So our timing was dead on. And so all of us young kids, boys and girls, were pulled out of art school and given a job at the Walt Disney studio, essentially to go back to school at Disney and begin a new training program as we learn how to become apprentice in-betweeners.
Oh, that's amazing. I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. Many of us were still at school when we were hired.
I want to tell, just in case somebody doesn't know if they can find folks with talent, they can teach them a few skills and.
Oh yeah, because there was no other place to learn it.
Combination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, nobody taught those skills. The only way you could learn those skills was in an animation studio, because there were no schools teaching you how to do this job. The only way to learn was to get a job, and you would learn it on the job. And that's the way it worked for pretty much all of the animation industry worked this way. You learn your job on the job.
In some of your early work at Disney, somebody saw a doodle and pushed you further along in your career, and I would be so happy to hear about that.
Oh, you might be speaking of Walt Disney.
I might be.
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen right away. I had been working at the Disney studio for a decade. Okay. I had been there from 1956 to 1966. And it was in the year 1966 that Walt Disney discovered me, you might say, in his animation department, and decided he wanted me to be part of his story team on the Jungle Book. This was not my decision or my desire, but I was literally sort of conscripted by Walt Disney himself to join the story team on the Jungle Book, which was a marvelous thing because it gave me the opportunity to work with Walt Disney himself, something I never could have imagined. So I was
How was it different than what you imagined?
Well, I never thought it would happen. Keep in mind, how many kids think they're actually going to be able to work with the boss himself? I was just happy having a job at the Walt Disney Studio. The idea of working with Walt Disney was something I never even imagined. That was just like an impossible dream. Why in the world?
And the way that it happened.
Yeah, and but this kind of thing could happen at the Disney Studio. Walt was well known for pulling people out
recognizing talent and
he would find somebody in a different department in his studio and decide they needed to work in another department or do another job. He was Walt had a very keen sense of what you were good at, and he knew people and he knew their abilities. Sometimes he knew them better than we did. And so you might be doing one job, and Walt Disney would decide you would be better in a different job position, that you had a certain skill that wasn't being utilized, and that perhaps you should be doing a different job. Walt had a very keen eye, he was a great, he could really ferret out talent in his studio and decide who should be doing what. So for me, I had no idea I could do the job Walt was basically throwing me into. Honestly, I had no idea I could do it, but he thought I could. And so that ended up changing my life and changing my career. Pretty amazing.
It's incredible to be pushed along on merit. And yeah, are you spending that decade doodling in the corner?
No, I was spending that decade working
Working, of course.
like every other artist. I mean, I once again, I was doing my job, honestly having no idea that my life was about to change. It's not that I didn't enjoy my job. I did. I enjoyed it immensely and was having a great time. It's just that an unexpected opportunity came along. And so I found myself in a totally different position, and a position that would change my life and career from then on out. So for a kid like me, and I was still in my 20s, I was still quite young, but it was a very, very big opportunity. And even more so, the opportunity to work with Walt Disney himself. That was an incredible opportunity for a young kid just starting out in this business.
It's amazing. And through guidance that you directly got from Walt Disney, are you able to kind of give us a little bit of a sense of what that was like in a few words? Or
yeah, well, in a sense, by being in meetings with Walt Disney throughout 1966, I was mentored by Walt Disney. He was my teacher. He was my guru. We learned from him, and he was a master. Walt was a master storyteller, a master entertainer. So what better teacher could one have than to be in the same room with one of the greatest storytellers in the world?
And that's amazing. I did, it's funny you mentioned the storytelling aspect, and I did read a little blurb about your strong belief about storytelling and content being priority and narrative, and I completely agree. And I wonder, were there writers, maybe you could elaborate a little bit about that collaboration process between visual artists, writers, Walt Disney himself in those early work?
Yeah, well, storytelling, art is storytelling. Keep in mind, it's not just the writers who are telling stories. Writers are putting words on paper, but artists are putting images on paper. And yet we're all doing the same thing. We are all telling stories. We are all building a narrative. We are all developing characters. So in the sense, we're all doing the same job. We're using different tools. One might be a writer, you're at your typewriter, today at your computer. An artist, you're at your drawing board, but you're doing the same thing. You are trying to tell a compelling story. And it takes a while to learn how to do that effectively, and to be able to be mentored by a great storyteller like Walt Disney. Well, it doesn't get any better than that. I've had probably the best training any storyteller could have had to learn from a story master who has influenced, culture around the world, not just in the United States, but all over the world. Disney films.
Do you think anybody had any idea what an impact it would have on inspiring children all over the world, consistently and potentially forever?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Walt Disney knew the incredible influence he would have. I don't think Walt Disney could have envisioned how large his company would be today. Keep in mind, when I came to Disney back in the 1950s, Walt Disney Studios was pretty much one of the smallest studios in Hollywood. It was almost it was like a little family studio. It wasn't that big at all. And now today, it is a mega corporation employing hundreds of thousands of people. I don't think Walt Disney could ever imagine that his little studio would grow so large that would have theme parks around the world, that would be sailing cruise ships, through the oceans. It has just become a massive, massive entertainment enterprise.
I'm glad. Yeah, I'm having a great time speaking with you. So I'll ask my previous question. The Jungle Book. You mentioned Jungle Book earlier. I'm curious to know where artists and animators and cartoonists would have a reference for things like the Indian temple we saw in Jungle Book, or castles and Sleeping Beauty, things like that. So now we have Google, and we assume that, but there's so much visual reference available.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, it's true today we have these marvelous shortcuts like the internet, which enables us to go anywhere in the world. But I want you to know that back in the old days, before we had Google, before we had the internet, we would literally travel to other countries around the world when we were doing our research. We would literally travel to Africa, to China, to Australia, wherever we had to go when we were doing development on a new film. We would travel there to learn the culture, to learn about the food, the architecture, everything about that particular culture. So in the old days, we didn't use Google, we didn't use the internet. We got on a plane and we would fly to Paris to study the cathedral at Notre Dame. We would fly to Africa to see the Serengeti. We would fly to China to see the Great Wall. So we literally would travel around the world to do our research.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Hands-on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, hands-on, but it's very necessary for giving your project that authenticity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that kind of sincere aesthetic that you were able to locate. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, when you go to a place, you can actually live, you can feel it because you are immersed in that particular society, and there's nothing better than that. Because otherwise, if you're coming in with a superficial knowledge, well, your work is going to lack credibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump to, I still have infinite questions about this whole Disney process, but of course, I'll reserve.
There's a whole lot to talk about. I mean,
oh my gosh.
Been around since the 1920s. And so there's a lot of history. There's a lot to the Disney legacy. Indeed, one could talk for hours about Disney.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you bet.
This is such an honor. I'm going to jump to Pixar really quick. Did you find? Yeah. So at Pixar, I'm curious. You also got to work with another envelope pusher, Mr. Jobs.
Oh, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was a savvy businessman. Steve was smart enough to buy Pixar. Steve is a very creative guy, but he's a better businessman. So he recognized an opportunity when he saw it. So he saw that Pixar had great potential. So he bought the company from George Lucas for around $5 million. Probably the wisest purchase anybody's ever made.
Did you feel like he had a passion for animation at any point?
Steve had a passion for creativity. Steve Jobs was an amazing gentleman that we lost much too early. I'd always wanted to meet him. I never thought I would have the opportunity to meet Steve, and yet lo and behold, our paths came together while working at Pixar Animation Studios, and I got a chance to know Mr. Jobs, to talk about technology, creativity, what would happen with Apple. At the time, Apple was in dire straits. The company was doing poorly, and Steve needed to go back to Apple to fix it, and indeed he did just that. So it was an opportunity to be around creative people. I've always been lucky that I've been around incredibly creative leaders like Walt Disney, like Steve Jobs, like John Lasseter, and we've done great work together. But it's the combination of people who are willing to push the envelope, people who are willing to not listen to the naysayers, but willing to take that next step to basically leap off the cliff, you might say, to take a chance, to risk everything, to do something great and to do something new.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Well
Yeah,
said.
right.
To jump back in time a little bit, I read that you did go right back to drawing when you finished serving in the military. And I'm curious to know how that experience affected your artwork. I think artists, often animators, especially if you're in children's animation, you have to be a bit of a humanitarian and see the good in people. How did that experience affect your artwork?
I don't think my service in the military had any effect on my artwork. I mean, I was an artist before I went into the military, and I was an artist when I came out of the military. If my service overseas did anything for me, it was to, in a sense, open my eyes, to enlighten me, to inform me that I was a very lucky kid to have been born in the United States, where we've had every opportunity. We've had freedom, the freedom to be whatever we wanted to be, to do whatever we wanted to do. And seeing some third world countries where their options were so limited, where just living from day to day was a struggle, I had no idea what poverty was until I saw a third world country. I had no idea what it was like for people to go hungry or not have shelter, or to be at the risk of being killed. We never, as a kid growing up in America, how could you experience that? You can't, because in America, everything is good, everything works. And to go overseas and to see a country where people do not have proper health care, who do not have enough to eat, that was eye-opening. And I think that was the greatest impact my military service had on me. Yeah.
Did you want to elaborate a little bit about AfroKids.org or a combination of that and maybe your independent projects? I'm very eager to hear about things you're independently cooking up.
Yeah, well, I've always worked on various projects, not just the Walt Disney Studios and Pixar, Hanna-Barbera. I have bounced around and done many things. My experience with AfroKids pretty much came out of my partnership with Leo Sullivan. We did educational films together back in the 1960s, essentially films on African American history. And so out of that educational program came this internet experiment that my colleague Leo wanted to do, that he called AfroKids. And that was an Afrocentric opportunity to teach kids, to help kids gain knowledge and values. And so I've been very much a part of that, working with Leo. But it was basically his idea. It was his idea to want to provide a site where he could give entertainment and education to young Black kids, because he felt there was a real need there, much in the same way we did back in the 1960s when we did films on Black history. So that need is always there, and I've always wanted to be a part of education. And because I spent so much of my time creating educational films, that's very much a part of what I do. Entertainment is great, but education is very, very important as well.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Have you seen any pictures recently that you feel are inspiring in the same way that early works that you were part of are now? Any recent films?
Oh my, that's a loaded
What are we
question.
watching?
I am literally watching everything. I am a member of the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences. So if there's any one thing I do, it is watch movies. All the time. I watch movies. I speak with filmmakers. It's the business I'm in. So I see a lot of everything, live action and animation. So yeah, I'm always seeing films that inspire me or that inform me.
What are some titles?
Oh, some of the. Oh,
What should I check out next?
oh, good heavens! The list is so long. When I tell people, like the list of Oscar nominees, keep in mind all of those films I watch every year, and it's a ton of films. Good grief! And then people say, "Well, what was your favorite film?" I can't pick a favorite because there are so many. Good grief! And just being asked that question, my mind boggles now because I'm thinking, okay, now what did I vote for? What inspired me last year at last year's Oscars, or I should say this year's Oscars, because the Academy Awards are just passed. But there are so many great films and great filmmakers. I think what inspires me are the fact that there are so many young filmmakers and so many women who are now writing, directing, and producing. One of my favorite filmmakers is a young woman, Ava DuVernay, who I really admire her work. She made the film Selma that I saw years ago about Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement back in the 1960s. I was very much a part of that civil rights movement, and so when Ava DuVernay made Selma and basically recreated these images that I remember, because I keep in mind I was alive during that time. I experienced the civil rights movement, and so to have a young woman like Miss DuVernay make a film and make it very well, that's just really exciting to see. I meet with a lot of young filmmakers, a lot of young men and women who are writing and directing. And because I have the opportunity to know them and to work with them and spend time with them, especially at the Motion Picture Academy, we do a lot of outreach, a lot of educational outreach to young boys and girls who want to be filmmakers. So we have these sessions on weekends where we bring in kids, some high school, some university age, and they meet with professional filmmakers. And we tell them what we do and why we do what we do. And they're able to meet with writers and the directors and producers and actors and composers. And we share our skills and our experience with these kids, many of whom are still in high school. So I find that's very exciting. And so just to choose a handful of films every year, so many films. So many films.
Like you very much answered the question.
I am literally overwhelmed by motion pictures, and then people say, "Well, what was your favorite film last year?" And I'll say, I was surprised by Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I didn't think I'd like that movie, but I ended up liking it very much.
Me too.
Yeah. So every now and then, even an old pro like me, I'll be surprised by a filmmaker who will make a film that I think I'm going to hate. And I'll absolutely love the film. But there are so many filmmakers I love. I love. What was the one about the one? Gee, I'm getting old now because all these titles are slipping my mind. The Grand Budapest Hotel. Love that film. And one of my favorite actors is in that film, Jeff Goldblum. And I know Jeff. And to be able to know the actor and to see the actor in a film like this, that I watched this film probably a dozen times because I like it that much. And I'm really lucky that I live and work in such an exciting business, and I get to know and meet so many incredibly talented people. And I consider myself a very lucky guy to be able to chat with great actors like Helen Mirren and Tom Hanks and just so many incredible people. And I get a chance to sit down and talk with them one-on-one. Not everybody's able to do that, Not everybody can sit down and have a conversation with a big shot movie star, but I can do that. And I'll tell you, it's even a guy who's old as I am and somewhat jaded, it's still exciting to be able to sit down and chat with a movie star, and I get a chance to do that on occasion. So it's part of the fun of this business.
sure they're just excited to be speaking with you. I feel like creative folks talking with other creative folks just gets creative stuff done.
Yeah, well, we are all creators. We are all storytellers. We're all filmmakers. And so we're all engaged in this same business of entertaining people, hopefully at times informing people as well. But essentially, we're entertainers and hopefully bringing a little bit of light and joy into a sometimes very dark world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Yeah.
So I guess those are all the questions I have. I mean, I could, like you said, we could talk for hours and hours. It never ends. I feel like I've taken up of your time.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of answers. And believe you me, when I sit down with some of my favorite people and people that I truly admire, I can honestly spend all day just talking to them. And because there's so much that I want to know, and so much that I'm still eager to learn. And like I said, to be able to spend time with, screenwriters like Rod Serling and composers like Randy Newman and Michael Giacchino, and to know these guys and to sit down and work with them and talk with them. That's a very special thing for a kid
Very powerful.
A kid who grew up wanting to be an adult and make movies and actually have that dream come true. I think I'm sometimes one of the luckiest kids in the world because I was able to realize my dreams.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is pretty incredible.
And I do agree that everybody is a creator, right? What is that Einstein quote where if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you won't think it does much?
That's very good. Very true. Very true. Yeah. All of us have something to bring to the table. We all have something we can give, that we can share. And that's important, and I tell people that. I tell my students, and I teach on occasion. I'm not a full-time teacher, but I do teach on occasion. And I love telling my students, get out there and do what it is you want to do. Be what you want to be. Nobody's holding you back, and don't feel there's anything in your way. If there's something you want to do and you have the passion, then go for it and achieve those goals, because they're there and there's nothing holding you back. I mean, like when I was a kid, I had dreams of going to Hollywood and making movies. Now, some people might have thought of that as a crazy dream, but it came true. So
you worked and you worked.
Yeah, you work and you can do it. You can do it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Floyd.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure, and happy to spend this time with you talking about dreams, your dreams, and my dreams.
Your dreams, your very materialized dreams.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. Yeah.
It's incredible. And I very much appreciate that you continue to inspire others and you continue to work and create things and just keep the bulb going.
Yeah, that's what I do today. Mainly, I work with the kids because they will carry on long after I'm gone. So I try to help them along their way.